My name's Sarah McNeilly. Uh, I guess I would consider myself a multidisciplinary artist, but I'm primarily a theater artist. I also sort of dabble in, I don't know, nature-based installations and a bit of design and that kind of stuff. A little bit of dance, a little bit of music, but um, I consider myself a theater artist, an actor. And I always say, because I'm an actor, I can act like I'm a musician or act like I'm a more competent designer than I am. That was a very long-winded answer. There's more to come.
Amazing. I can't wait to hear all of it. So, Titty Cakes. Can you tell me a little about it and how it came to be?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I'd love to say, seeing your reaction to saying the title just pleased me and tickled me so much. Um, it certainly is quite the title, but I have that reaction every time I say it, and I hope other people do too. I know it's certainly not for everyone, and I think some people may clutch their pearls at it, but I think that's if you're the type of person that's going to clutch your pearls at the title of this show, it's probably not the show for you, which was part of my rationale of keeping that title. I think it's kind of a good litmus test. About the show, how did it come to be? This is one of those rare occasions where it was actually a granting program uh that helped create the show. How it all started actually was in the height of pandemic um depression and isolation. It was in one of the very first lockdowns. A good friend and colleague of mine who runs the theater on King uh didn't have a computer. It broke, and I remember just being devastated at the thought that my friend and colleague at the time, when all we had was Zoom, and we were still washing our groceries at this time. It was, ground zero of the pandemic. And I just was like obsessing over him. Like, we need to get him a computer. Like, this cannot be happening. That's the only way we can connect with each other. So the Canada Council um redirected, I don't know, like it was travel and tour travels or some fund that was moot, that they couldn't use because of the pandemic. I think it was a travel fund. And they redirected it and created this one time only digital now program, which was highly competitive, multidisciplinary. So instead of normally being for, theater or visual art or dance or music or whatever, it was just every artist in Canada fighting for the same scraps in the pandemic. So it was highly competitive, and needless to say, I knew it was a long shot. I was one of those things where it was like, it's never going to happen, but might as well try. And part of the appeal was this program is one of the only times that capital expenditures were permitted. So something like a computer, um, which normally that's not allowed in a lot of granting programs. So it's funny when you ask, how did this all come about? Well, it actually came about in pandemic desperation, because my friend and colleague didn't have a computer. So, with a lot of help from my other friend and colleague, I don't know, I should be using their names. My friend and colleague who runs the theater on King, who didn't have a computer, was Ryan Kerr. My other friend and colleague, who helps run the theater on King, is a very accomplished artist, Kate Story. So with her mentorship, she helped me write the grant application. And again, both of us, right? Well, that's not going to happen. That's never going to happen. It's a long shot. Well, fast forward about a year later, and it didn't happen. It was rejected, as expected. Um, but because of that, there was an idea for a show that, when it was fleshed out, actually seemed like kind of a good idea. So through the Ontario Council, on behalf of the Theatre on King, Kate applied for a presenters grant program, and that was accepted. So all of a sudden, this idea was a possibility. We had a show. And a few more smaller grants, I think through EC3 and some of the City of Peterborough money that the Theatre on King receives was slated for this project as well. And it was on its way. I was doing research and writing and that kind of thing. Again, still height of the pandemic where we're all, on computers, except for Ryan, corresponding with each other. And then this spring, much to everyone's surprise, the Canada Council reached out and said something along the lines of, your project ranked really high with the jury. I'm not sure if other people dropped out or if they were able to find more funds, but more funds were available. And we went from runner-up to being accepted in the program.
So,
So that is the very long-winded story of how the show came about.
so would you say that Titty Cakes is autobiographical? And if yes, what do you have to say about theater or art as a form of personal storytelling?
Hmm. It's absolutely autobiographical. There's many components to it. It actually, I don't know, I can give my elevator pitch. There's this Catholic saint, Saint Agatha, and she is patron saint of breast cancer patients, bell founders, bakers, rape victims. So I started learning about this saint, and I should say I'm not Catholic, I'm not Italian, I have no connection to saints at all. But the connection I did have is I was first introduced to her by her iconography. There's all these beautiful and very bizarre, mainly Renaissance paintings of her. And in each of them, she's holding a bloodied cloth over her chest and presenting her severed breasts on a platter. And you don't really see that every day. So the show, I should say, at her annual festival every year, part of the celebration, they make these cakes. They're called Mini de Sant'Agata, which translates into little breasts of Saint Agatha, or as I like to call them, titty cakes, because they're really hilarious. They just look like little breasts. They have little cherry nipples, and they're these weird little breast-shaped cakes. So the show itself is sort of triangulated. It's a cooking show where I'll be making these cakes on stage, and I interweave stories about the passion and life of Saint Agatha and how they connect to my own autobiographical work as a breast cancer survivor, as well as a sexual assault survivor. Whether it's telling personal stories or created ones, like just radical joy, whatever it is. I mean, that's for me what it is to be human. It's what we do cross-culturally, throughout time. And it's something I hold really sacred. And that was something I noticed during the pandemic, that it was so much more than being unemployed, out of work. It was a loss of subjectivity, identity, I think. And I really realized that for me as a heathen, part-time atheist, agnostic, I guess, the stage is my church. It's my place of ritual and becoming. And I really had a longing for that. And I think that informed this work, looking at saints and the profane and the power of theater as a place of healing, of transformation, and of ritual, of ceremony.
This is a beautiful segue to my next question. I was reading an article on Mike Worth, I believe, on Crow Hill and your part in it. And there you briefly touch on art as a form of therapy. But yeah, so in that article, there was a brief quote from you about art as a form of therapy. Would you say, or I guess you did touch on this here too, but titty cakes as a form of therapy for you, for people who, because obviously it deals with a lot of deeply personal and important themes. Uh, yeah, well, do you, was titty cakes therapeutic? The making of it, and just presenting it, do you hope people take it that way too?
Absolutely.
Mm.
And it's really interesting. I mean, this is hands down the bravest thing I've ever done. I think before any work on it was done, I think when I had the idea, this has always been for me a work of healing, a meditation of healing. And I think putting it in that container has supported me and also been a safety measure as well, because it is, this is heavy duty. It's the greatest hits of Sarah McNeilly's trauma. Um, double album. But it I didn't know how it was going to go. It could have, I do not want to re-traumatize myself or anyone else for that matter. But that was a risk that I had to accept. And it's really fascinating for me in my own self-discovery doing this work to see that it has been anything but. I find this work has been empowering and even euphoric.